The next topic, the sixth topic of chapter number 1, if my chronology is correct, is about functions and history of money. To be fair, you don't need to know about the history of money as such. However, if you understand the history of money, we get an idea of where we are coming from. This is from page number 31 to page number 33. Through prehistoric times, from roughly 10,000 BC, we have noticed, archaeologists have noticed a system of currency which was the first system of currency or the first system of trading that we know in our human history was the barter system. You need to know in your examination, in your book, how does the barter system work. The idea is that if I have an apple and someone else across, maybe across the other town has a banana, and let's say I need the banana and he needs the apple, so I would give him my banana and in return I would get the apple, right? So now this would obviously happen on a national level where one kingdom would give the other kingdom, let's say, wheat or barley, and in return the other kingdom would give them grapes or wine or any other commodity that they may own or they may have resources to. Now this system is a pretty simplistic system, and it existed as far as we can see in our history, as far as we can notice. However, it is pretty obvious that this system has a critical problem, and the terminology we use for that problem is called the double coincidence. I hope my spelling is correct. Coincidence of wants. Of course, it's a fancy term. The meaning is pretty straightforward. For the barter system to work, I had to have the resources that the other person needs. Suppose I have an apple and the other guy has a banana. Now I want the banana. Suppose he doesn't want the apple. Now he wants grapes, for instance. So now instead of trading with him, I will first need to find someone who has grapes and who needs apple, so that I can get the grapes from him and then use the grapes to get the banana. So you can see that the barter system, although it might be simplistic and straightforward, it has clear errors, and one of that is that double coincidence of wants. You need to have that. It is very difficult to get two individuals who may have exactly the right things to trade. As a result, the barter system, although it existed in prehistoric time where the world was pretty simple, through evolution, through time, this system is not abolished, but it by and large got replaced. It got replaced by another system where coins were first introduced, and we call that system commodity currency. My apologies for the background noise with the current quarantine. My entire family is in the house, and you can have some background noise because of it. So then you have the system of commodity currency. So first you have the system of barter where you trade something for something else, which would be great if you both have the things that each other needs. However, the problem of barter system is that you need to have double coincidence of wants. You need to have two individuals who have exactly the resources which each other wants. Otherwise, it becomes complicated. It becomes very difficult to work with. Through evolution, through time, humanity evolved a new system known as the commodity currency. So here are two examples of commodity currency. One is in Mesopotamia, other one is in Greek. To be fair, commodity currency existed throughout the world in different forms. The idea is that we use the weight of the coin or the weight of the currency as a trade or as a measurement of something. Let's say I want to buy 16 gram of wheat, which sounds very weird. 16 gram of wheat. Okay, let's just say 16 kg of wheat. 16 kg of wheat. Each coin would represent a certain weight. Let's say this coin represents 5 kg. Right? So if I want to buy 16 kg of wheat, I would have to give roughly 3 coins away to get that 16 kg of wheat. Roughly to get that 16 kg of wheat. So I would trade in my coins in return for commodity, that be wheat, that be rice, or that be any other commodity, any other basic essential good or service in the kingdom. Now this is much better than barter system because we have a form of currency. We have something that you can trade with. You don't need to have the material that the other person needs. If the other person needs a banana instead of apples, I don't need, if another person needs grapes instead of apples, now I don't need to go and get grapes. I could simply trade in my coins for the banana. I could say, hey, I want 5 kgs of banana. Here's one coin. The one coin values 5 kgs, so therefore give me 5 kgs. Of course, this coin doesn't value 5 kg in reality, but you guys get the point, I hope, that we are using currency, we are using the weight of the currency, that the weight of the currency represents a certain amount. And then we are using that to buy or sell goods and services. Now, of course, creating currencies and using currencies was not something which was widespread throughout history. This was usually done around the capital, where the stronghold of the kingdom was strong, was tight. But in the countryside, people were still using commodity, because the commodity currency, people were still using barter system. Sorry for that. Because the commodity currency have certain problems too. The first problem commodity currency has is that when you have complexity, it doesn't work. You need to have a simple society. Society must be simple. I'm going to put it this way. Suppose instead of wheat, I want to buy a dish which is made up of wheat and, let's say, strawberries. So I want to buy a dish which is made up of wheat and strawberry. How would I measure that, right? Because both wheat and strawberry don't have the same value. It takes more time, more effort to grow strawberries than it takes for wheat. So how would I value that in terms of weight? So when you have those complexities in commodity, currency doesn't do a fair judgment, so that we can trade easily, so that it could be a fair trade. Also, for commodity currency to work, you need to have all items must have same value. So the strawberry must have the same value theoretically, and then compared to wheat, compared to any other goods or services, which again is not realistic. So the problem with commodity currency is that it does not give us a fair value. It doesn't give a fair measurement of value, right? For some items, let's say wheat, it could be undervalued. For some items such as strawberries, it could be overvalued. Another problem with commodity currency is that it doesn't take account of labor involved. So think about mangoes. Mangoes are seasonal fruits, and it takes a lot of effort to grow a mango. It takes usually 5 to 6 years for the mango to actually start giving off mangoes. So the labor involved in that is not taken into account in commodity currency. We are simply judging based upon the goods or service produced, which again is not accurate. You can notice throughout history the barter system. Yes, it was simple, you could work with. However, there were some clear errors in it. The commodity currency system, it was applicable in certain scenarios, but when things became complex, it was no longer applicable, it was no longer practical. Then finally, in the 500 BC, we have our first evidence. Of paper currency. Then paper currency, also known as representative currency. Representative currency. Here is an example of the earliest banknote that we have discovered. This is from Song Dynasty in China. And then through time, these type of paper notes have evolved in size and also in their shape. Here's a £1 shilling of England, and then you have the good old American dollar. Now you will notice in all of these currencies, you have certain form of you have some sort of image. That could be image of a person, that could be image of a location. I'm not pretty sure what's happening over here. I think you guys are wrestling or something. And then you also have a certain value, the amount that the value that the note contains, the value that the note holds for. In all of these currencies, you will notice that there are certain similarities because they're derived from each other. And then all of these currencies have a certain barcode. Of course, in these barcodes are data that shows us where this currency was made, what was the date when the currency was made, and the location where it was manufactured, and from which bank or from which institute was it manufactured. In olden ones, you had that written on the paper, but in modern currencies, you have that in the form of barcode. So this paper currency is what we use in our time. In your examination, in your book, you need to understand how did we get to this currency. We had initially the barter system, which sounded great, but then there were some clear errors, there are problems, there are clear complexities. Then you have the commodity currency system, which again had issues. It was so simple, it did not take account of the same, it didn't take values, it didn't give the same value to all goods and services. And then you have the problem of labor. It did not take into account how much labor was involved. We were judging solely based upon the weight of a good or service. The paper currency helps us solve all of those problems. And now we can get to the functions of money. Function of money as something to be called money, something to be called a currency. They need to have four property. The first one is that they must be medium of exchange. Means these currencies must be used by the majority of the population. If let's say 40% of the population use banknotes and 40% of the population use barter and 20% use commodity currency, we cannot call this a medium of exchange. Why? Because not everyone is using. Suppose I am using barter system for my trade, and let's say you are using currency as your means of trade. Of course, for us to trade with each other, it's impossible, because I would want you to give me physical goods and services, where you would be able to provide me only with notes. So for currencies to work in modern times, they must be used throughout the country. At least 95% of the population must use them. Of course, we need to prevent plagiarism, which almost all modern currencies have barcodes in them, which prevents people from making fake notes. The second function of money is that it must be unit of account. What that means is that we must be able to compare two goods and services with the currency. Let's say you have apple and you have bananas. If you are using currency, we can value them appropriately. We can say, hey, 1 kg of apple costs $2, whereas 1 kg of banana costs $5, for instance, right? Currencies help us give value, give accurate value to each goods and services. So the problem of same value which we had with the commodity system does not exist with paper currency. You can give them accurate values based upon their supply and their demand. So if the supply of apples are high, where the demand is low, of course the value of apple must be lower. Whereas for bananas, if the demand is high and supply is low, naturally the price of banana would be higher. So by using currencies, you are giving them a correct measure of their value. We call that unit of account. The third value a currency must have for it to work properly in an economy, it must have the property that it should be able to store value. Paper currency must be able to store value for it to work, in the sense that $1, let's say $1, $1 buys me, let's say, one banana in today's time. That if I store my $1 in a closet somewhere, 10 years from now, will that same dollar be enough for me to buy one banana? This depends on inflation. If the inflation is high in an economy, the store of value property no longer works, because you can't store value with money anymore. What money used to buy back a few years ago, it will no longer be able to buy today. Its purchasing power reduces. We call that PPP, purchasing power partiality. So it reduces when you have inflation. So this property depends on the inflation of the country. The fourth property and the final property that a currency must have for it to work properly in economy is that it should be used as a standard of deferred payment. Let me put it this way. Let's say you did a favor to me. You gave me your car, right? You gave me your car and you said you can buy the car, you can use the car for rent for 5 days, right? For me to pay you back, of course, I need to give you something that has the same value of me driving the car for 5 days, right? Let's say you were to say to me, for you to drive 1 day, I want $5. That means by the end of the 5th day, I should give you 5 into 5, $25, right? What you will notice is that I'm using money as a standard for deferred payment. You did a favor to me, I need to give you back. I have some debt on you, so you have some debt on me. I owe something to you. We should be able to use money to give that debt off. If you can do that, then money is performing its function. Again, just a quick summary. A money, to be able to work properly, it must have all of these function. A money can only have all of these function if the economy is stable. If the economy has a high amount of inflation, of course, it will no longer be able to store value, because the money will lose value as it goes forward. It will no longer be used. If you have high inflation, money can no longer be used as a unit of account, because when you have high inflation, the value of a good or service is changing constantly. As a result, it's difficult for people to use it as a unit of account. And over time, it can become void, it can become obsolete as a medium of exchange. A good example of this was Zimbabwe in 2008. Zimbabwe, I hope my spelling is correct. My apologies, my spellings are not that good. And then you have Venezuela. In this, I think it's pretty much incorrect. In recent 2015 to 2017, you had the Venezuelan crisis of inflation. These both countries both Zimbabwe and Venezuela had extremely high inflation, and in both of those countries we could notice that over time money was no longer used as a store of value, because it lost its value. Over time it was no longer used as a unit of account. People started using other currencies, US dollars for instance, in Zimbabwe, which was common. And then people no longer use it as a medium of exchange. People started using other forms of medium of exchange, maybe gold, maybe US dollar, or other currencies. The idea is that money to function properly, it must have these four functions, and you need to know that for your examination. What are the four functions of money? Number one. Number two, will these four functions always be valid? Which is incorrect. These four functions are only valid, they only work if you have low and stable inflation in an economy. Therefore, inflation and controlling inflation are one of the main functions of macroeconomy. So again, a quick summary of what we did today. We understood the history of money. We understood that throughout history we never used one mechanism of trade. We used that the trade mechanism evolved throughout the year. The first system that we know of from our human history is barter system. Barter system, you trade one good for the other, which is great as long as you don't have double coincidence of one. As soon as you have double coincidence of one, it becomes very complex and it becomes very difficult to trade. Then we developed the commodity currency system, where we would have currency which would have a certain weight to it, a certain value to it, and you could use that for trading commodities. The problem with that was it was too simplistic. When you have something complicated, it becomes difficult to use it, it becomes inaccurate to use it. It didn't take account for the labor involved, and neither did it take account for different values of different goods and services. The current system that we use for currency is called representative currency, where we use banknotes, where we use deposits and things like that to as a medium of exchange, as a source of trade. For this system to work, it must have four functions, which we went through. And for this system to work, we must have low and stable inflation in economy. When you have high inflation, it no longer works the way it's supposed to be working. Hope this was helpful to you, and hope you were able to understand the history and functions of money for your syllabus.